before the video starts. As I was going through the slideshow, I realized there's one image that has some like pornography in the background. So if that's something, be aware of it. And there's another example image that a student did that is sort of cinematic with some kind of like, violent imagery in it. There's some like fake blood and things. So both of those are toward the end. One is a David Hilliard shot, and the other one is a student one at the very end. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that they will be there in the slideshow. All right, most of it is pretty chill.
Hello, and welcome to
Distance Learning.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about multi-panel imagery in preparation for Assignment 3. Assignment 3 is going to be a triptych that's 3 image panels. And we're going to talk about sort of conceptual basis for working with multiple images in a way where those 3 images form one thing, right? Rather than sort of like 3 images as part of a sequence, 3 images as part of like a storytelling thing or a photojournalism thing or a photo book thing. This is a distinctive like one thing made of 3 panels or multiple panels. We'll look at a bunch of people doing work with multiple panels. Most of them are not going to be what you will do for this assignment, right? The one that we're going to do is David Hilliard. He has a very specific way of working, and we're going to make work in that fashion because it will teach you, hopefully, some particular things that are useful and meaningful as far as how photography works. But we're going to look at other folks before then because, frankly, just looking at one person is boring, and maybe you want to make work that's not an assignment, and you want to make some work inspired by these other people, and they're great. So there you go. Let's go ahead and take a look at some multi-panel imagery. This slideshow, as ever, is on the website, so you can go look at it as a PDF, has the names of the people in it. Look, there's some names down there. Don't add a note. I don't want to add a note. So this is Luther Kanadu, and he's Ghanaian, but so his background is Ghanaian, but he grew up maybe he was born in Canada, Ottawa, I think. I mean, Canadians, always nice, making photographs. So he's really, really interesting. I really like his work. If you remember Paul and Pagi Sapuya, you will see similarities, commonalities maybe is a better term than similarities, between these 2 ways of working, in that there are sort of layers of where the print is, right? We're sort of seeing photographs of printed out photographs, and those printed out photographs are partial. They're, we're seeing edges of them. We're seeing them as pieces of paper. We're sort of understanding them as pieces of paper, and we're understanding the thing that we're looking at as a photograph of a previous photograph. But the similarities are pretty superficial, right? So Luther's work has a lot more sort of this like Xeroxy quality to many of the pieces. They are more lo-fi, right? He has like tape in there. He has these like seams where one image is made out of a bunch of different pieces. He has images repeating where we see sort of a gap in time between these pieces. Right, so here we have, right, we sort of see this one where we understand that to be also this woman who is also there, and we understand these as basically the same photograph at different moments of time. And then we see this guy here and see, okay, he's walking past, but this is sort of the main image in the middle, right? It's a little bit bigger. The 2 flanking images are narrower. So he's working, I think, as much with what the photograph shows us as what the photograph sort of doesn't, right? These ideas of the photograph not being a complete or a exhaustive truth. So he's also working with like the photographic object in a way that is not sort of precious. Like these images are, or the Xerox, underlying Xeroxy laser printy things are not luxury items, right? They are just sort of like a material that he's using to make these photographs from. Let me see if I can get out of the way of the entire photograph. Right, this tape, love the tape, right? The tape kind of like foregrounds the fact that these are this like lo-fi put together thing, the idea that they could have been repositioned in different ways, like really, really, really interesting way of working. I'll put some links up on the website to some articles about him and his work. You should really check him out. I think he's someone who doesn't get a lot of buzz, or he's someone who I haven't seen a lot of buzz about. But I think that his sort of way that he works with people, the way that he makes the images, the way that he puts the images together, is really, to me, is super fascinating and a really interesting thing for photography to be doing. This is Joanne Verberg. She was initially sort of well known for working on the Western Rephotographic Survey project. I'm sort of blocking the middle of these things. I'm going to shrink this slideshow down and move it over to the side. So hold on a sec. There we go. Much better. So Joanne Verberg, she is working in a more recognizably triptych, quote unquote, fashion. So the previous work, right, there's multiple images, right? Sometimes there are multiple panels, but Luther is working in a way that is less rigid, right? It's less the same way every time. It's much more like images are cut or shrunk or enlarged, or they're like different, sort of proportions or whatever. Joanne Furberg coming out of, a maybe sort of more like 60s, 70s kind of vibe, a little bit more formal. The Western Rephotographic Survey project, if you're not familiar with it, definitely steeped in traditional ideas of how photography worked, especially vis-a-vis sort of like Western landscape photography. Engaging with it critically, but very much aware of those issues. So I think that some of that informs what she does as well, right? So it's like panel, panel, panel. Things to note, right? The focal point is different, like where she has actually gone in here and there we go. What she has focused on, she's actually doing some camera movements, so like the plane of focus shifts between the different images as well. But that's very noticeable, and you do have sort of continuity, right? You have that branch kind of coming through there, right? But here that background is very soft. Here that's sharp, right? So this sort of like in and out of where the plane of focus is sort of unusual, right? Some more things, more trees. It's all sort of like landscapey stuff, right? Here's portrait of her husband. He's a poet. I don't know that that's relevant, but he's often shown reading things or with books in this case, which I think is sort of a reference to that. But again, it's not a seamless panorama. That's very important, right? That's something that is definitely an aspect of what your homework will be, is that that's not what it needs to be, right? It's not supposed to be a seamless panorama. Right? If I wanted a seamless panorama, I'd use my iPhone and just like zoop, and there we go. So right, these moments of disjuncture, right, where the body shifts, right, this line here stepping down, that line continuing, the sort of angle pointing at the bottom half of him, pointing up this other direction. You understand them to be the same place, but you know that these photographs were taken separately and are now put together, right? So it's the same thing with Luther, right? He's got those images where they are, you sort of understand them to be different moments in time, right? So if I go back to something like this, right? Like we see these three images and we know that they couldn't have happened simultaneously. Same thing with Joanne Furberg's pictures, right? We know that she has taken one picture, another picture, another picture, another picture. She's put them all together. We sort of see this as one image or one sort of thing that we're looking at, one piece of work. But there is still that separation we understand mentally in time between the different panels. Right, so here again, right, there's sort of this doubling, right? We have the arm here, but then also the arm there. We know it's the same person. We recognize that time has elapsed between these panels, even as we understand them to be sort of in the same place of the same thing. A lot of fucking trees. You know, I'm not into trees, really not. Just so you can get a sense of the scale of these are really, really big. A lot of these, sort of unlike the work that we first saw that was like Xerox and lo-fi and whatever, a lot of these are like shot like, you know, big, large format cameras, and they're very like monumental, and they're playing into notions of like, you know, traditional triptychs with like altarpieces and other like very like big things that go in a church and somebody pays a lot of money for them. Which is a style of photography that I understand, but not super into, right? Like, I don't know why it needs to be so precious. Barbara Bosworth. So this is it's more trees. I like these trees better. This is a really interesting project where she went, and I think it's called like Champion Trees or something. But there's a list that's published that's like the biggest trees or the most like trees of like a bunch of different species of trees. Why is there a list? I don't know. Like, I didn't make the fucking list. And so she went and photographed them with like, you know, big 8x10 camera, and, you know, is making these really like large, monumental, like sort of the same way that the tree is this like big, imposing presence over time that has endured, you know, for some longer period of time than we've been alive. And so she's making these sort of big photographic multi-panel images that kind of respond to that. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about them is the way that, yes, the tree is there, right? You know, you could, if you just had that center panel, it's just the tree. But she's also included, this may be my favorite one, she's also included the space around the tree, right? The sort of like the sphere of influence of the tree, right? This person is lying on the ground over there, right? Because they're lying under the tree, right? That's like where they are on purpose because of the tree. Without the tree, they wouldn't be there. Without the tree, the space that is sort of created by its presence wouldn't be there. So these are a little bit more seamless panorama than we're going for. You know, there are still these distinctures just because, like, you know, things move in the wind from one panel to the next, right? Same thing here, right? These lines are not perfect, but they're pretty close. The thing that you should take away from this work is the way that she has made a 3-panel image where each panel could stand on its own. Each panel has a subject, a point of focus in a sort of like conceptual way, not like what you're focused on, like, come on. Right, like over here, we have this composition with like the person on the ground, we have the slide over there, we have the merry-go-round, right? Let me zoom in on that. Right, the center one, obviously we have the tree, and the one over on the left, you have this horse. It's a miniature horse. Looks pretty small. I don't know what's going on, horses. So that's something that you will need to have in your homework, right? So this idea of each of the 3 panels could stand on its own. Each of the 3 panels is a composition in its own right. That's super, super important, right? So not a seamless panorama, composition in its own right for each 3 of the panels, but they come together to make one big Gesamtkunstwerk, one big overall thing. Some more. Right, you know, again, right, so here we have this sort of house going on over here. There's this really nice relationship between these 2 white housey looking buildings, that white housey looking building over there. Right, this one, it does sort of turn the corner going into this image. But, right, this has a subject, can live on its own. This has a subject can live on its own. This has a subject can live on its own. The way that this tree kind of shapes the space, really nicely done. More things. This is sort of more naturey photography, whatever. But again, right, there's the sort of exemplar tree in the middle. I love the way that there's sort of nothing standing in front of it. Everything is sort of made space for it. But, you know, here's a subject over here in this image, right? This thing too, we sort of are looking through that clearing. So even though they're fairly busy pictures, each one does have a sort of a center, a focus, a subject to it, but they all come together and work as one big thing.